Finances. Something interesting is happening in the organic church world regarding finances. And I'll preface it with this too. There are delightful exceptions to what I'm about to say, but generally speaking, what's happened is that people are being set free from the demand of an institutional tithe, and they're not doing much financially. I've talked to people who are very like Frank Viola and John Zenz and guys like that, who are pretty deeply invested in organic church and some others, and it's generally the trend, and it's troublesome, that the misuse of our liberty has gone awry. We have misused our liberty. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the tithe issue. Brains better than mine have dealt with that. I know Samuel's dealt with it extensively here at the local fellowship. I'm just going to give 3 or 4 quick reasons why I don't think the tithe is in effect today, okay? 3 or 4 quick ones. Number 1, that tithe scripture says bring all the tithe. You know what the tithe percentage was in Israel? It wasn't 10%. It was between 23 and 27%. There was multiple tithes. So next time somebody tells you that they're obeying God by giving 10%, tell them they're cursed according to Malachi, because they're not bringing in 27. It's the truth. There were multiple tithes. If you add up all the tithes in the book of Leviticus, it totals about 22 to 23% of your, sometimes 27, depends how you do some calculations. So the 10% thing is fantasy. Even though the word tithe means 10%, it was 10% of this, 10% of this, 10% of this, to about a 23 to 27% total. So if you start getting in an argument with somebody that, hit them with that and say, oh, I'm so sorry that you're cursed by God for not tithing appropriately. Yeah, number 2, the same law that endorses the tithe says the tithe was for the Levites. Why? Because they were forbidden from owning property. How many pastors who badger you for the tithe got a fat car and a fat parsonage and a cottage? You can't have it both ways. You can't take half a verse and say it's binding on you guys, but the half that speaks to them, they don't have to deal with. Completely disingenuous. Number 3, well, you know, the tithe predated the law because Melchizedek tithe. Time out. I'm stupid enough to believe in the whole context of a verse. What did Melchizedek tithe from? Stuff he took from other people by killing them. And so you're going to make that the model for giving? You can't take part of a passage that suits you and apply it to everybody. He tithed from somebody else's stuff. The spoils of war. So to take that passage and normalize it for church existence is crazy. It's crazy. So the book, sometimes people say, Steve, you need to write a book on this. In my opinion, the book has already been written by a guy by the name of Matthew Naramore, called The Tithe, Low Order, Obsolete, and Defunct. If that book doesn't convince somebody, there is nothing I can say going to convince. How many of you have read Matthew's book? A good book, right? I mean, it just puts it to bed, period. He does a great job. So if, the tithe, low order, obsolete, and defunct. Naramore, N-A-R-R-A-M-O-R-E, Matthew. And I'm not getting a commission on that, I should. However, it's so funny. It's almost like when we were in the institutional construct, it was a no-brainer every week. What? The 10% check plopped into plate. I've written this book, and I can't give you the whole book in the next 25 or 30 minutes, which I'm going to try to do, stay within 25 or 35. So I'm just going to give you some nuggets and highlights from this, and it might be a bit piecemeal, and then I'm going to finish with a little exercise here. Some statistics that are depressing. I actually have in here the budget from a small church in Charlotte, and by small I mean annual budget $5 million. In Charlotte, that's a small church. 47% of $5 million pays staff salaries. 37% pays operational expenses. And 7% goes to missions. They have stats on how many people were saved and how many were baptized and so forth. Almost $20,000 a year per conversion. If it was any enterprise other than the church, what would you call that? Failure. Gross failure. A waste of money. I don't care who you are. I don't care, unless you're the federal government, right? Federal government. Call it the federal government, right? But people say, yeah, but look, they're doing great things. My point on this is, I believe this is morally reprehensible. I do not believe you'll be able to look Jesus in the eye and excuse that in that day. That is the national average for churches. Actually, it's worse. The average church gives 3% of their gross budget to outreach and evangelism. Isn't that funny? They want to pressure you for 10, but they're doing 7 or 3. Or maybe they're doing 10 and acting like it's a big deal. 85% of funds received by Untitled Church go towards internal operations and staff. 50% to salaries, pretty close to the 47 I just quoted. Mission and outreach account for about 3% of the average church budget. Guys, I just think that's broken and it's inexcusable. So now we're free, but what are we doing with our freedom? Here's another statistic. A friend of mine from Australia, get a load of this. He lives in a town of 60,000 people, 30 churches in this city, representing 6% of the population. At a very conservative estimate, they own $40 million worth of property, and $3 million are spent each year maintaining these systems. So that means we have $40 million of infrastructure, $3 million annual investment to reach 6%. In any real world, what would you call that? Failure.
Not sustainable.
Not sustainable.
Stop confusing us for the facts.
Yep. It's just another indication that things are broken. In this book, I also itemize the difference in patterns of giving between generations. The generation ahead of me, the World War II generation, they gave because an authority figure told them to, otherwise unquestioned. Those guys are dying off. And you know what's happening? They're not being replaced. In Christianity, it's called legacy ministries. You know what a legacy ministry is? It's like Billy Graham or Focus on the Family or Prison Fellowship. My daughter has worked for 2 Christian nonprofits in Washington, D.C. She knows the inside story. All those guys are struggling because those legacy donors are dying, and guess what? They're not being replaced.
People are asking questions now.
Because people are asking questions. My generation gave because the World War II generation told us to. But the Generation X, Gen Y, and the millennials, it's over. They will not give unless trust, accountability, and stakeholder, you have a stake in the say of how it's, they want to see something for their money. So the day, I've talked to Jeff about this, I believe institutional Christianity is going to collapse because the money is going to be pulled out. It's going to disappear. The 501c3 thing is going to disappear. How many multi-billions of dollars in Charlotte are there in church buildings in Charlotte? Lynn and I drove around the other day. Lynn's from Ohio, and I gave him the tour of some of the major. It's morally offensive. Not millions, not billions, multi-billions. There are churches in this community that are open 2 days a week that have homeless people sleeping in the cars across the street from them. That is morally and spiritually vile. It doesn't matter that they're good people and he preaches a good word and all this stuff. It doesn't matter. But okay, so we're out. We're not part of that anymore, let's say. But if our freedom has resulted in our wallets drying up, we've made a mistake. We're misusing our liberty. One of the joys that I have had since I quit tithing, and I actually have an article on my blog, Why I Quit Tithing. I got a lot of action on that article. As you can imagine. It's so great to have income that I can, on demand, send someplace to somebody in need. I can be in tune. I remember when we first moved here, I met somebody, some of you locals know this person, he has 9 children, he lost his job. I'm unemployed at the time. I got no money, I'm draining my savings, and I'm living off a little bit of unemployment. And I hear his story, and he says he's got 9 children, and he's got no job. Man, I just felt to write him a check for $200. That check changed his life, and you know who we're talking about. You know who I'm talking about. Because here's what the guy said. Now listen to what he said. I met this man for the first time, and he said, I've been going to a church for 25 years. I've been part of the men's group. You've just met me, and you've shown me more kindness than anybody in my whole church. It's the real deal. It's the real deal. So the whole thing about pay attention that we talked about earlier, pay attention. Listen. And now I'm free. I'm free to give. I'm not free to contract. I'm free to be more liberal and more prone to give based on bona fide need. Now, this is going to be a little survey, and for those of you that are taking notes, I'd kind of recommend you to write this down as we go through this. When we talk about giving, for those of you who have been here for the whole seminar, what are the 3 T's of giving? We've already talked about them. 3 T's. Time. Yeah. Time. See, it's not just your money. Let's say you're having a tough time financially. You can give of your gifts, your talents, or your time. So when we start talking about giving, it's not just money, but it includes money. I can give of the 3 T's. I can give my time, my talent, or my treasure to others. We also want to be disciplined and regular in our giving, as well as spirit-led. Here's what I personally try to practice. Try to practice a baseline of regular giving, and then pay attention for exceptional giving, exceptional need. Now, let me get to this one too. If you are currently in a traditional structured church, which I have no problem with, in terms of you being part of it, pay your fair share. You want the air conditioning on? Pay for it. You want chairs to sit in? Pay for it. You want ministry for your children? Pay for it. You want somebody to visit the hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning? Pay for it. I like to say it this way. I'm really sick and tired of Christian freeloaders. They want to drain you of your virtue, your energy, and time. And they don't want to give anything in return. Well, no. If that's your thing, nobody's judging you. But don't freeload. Sure, you want electricity? You want the toilets to flush? Who do you think should pay for it? There's something called the Pareto principle. P-A-R-E-T-O.
Burrito?
Yeah, not Pareto. Pareto. P-A-R-E-T-O. Burrito. It's actually a social psychological principle. It's been documented, and it is this. In any group of human beings, 20% of the human beings carry the burden for the other 80%. It doesn't matter, any religion or whatever. 20% carry the 80%. I saw a survey of like a mega church, like running 20,000 or 30,000 or something. And they did a study over a 2-year period. Guess what the turnover rate was in that church over 2 years? 80%. 20% of the place was maintained in it for the rest of the 80. In 2 years, they'd had a turnover of 80% of the people. Don't be part of that. Don't play that game. Do your fair share. Number 2, don't wait till you have extra, because how many of you ever discovered extra never comes?
That's true.
It's one of the biggest lies. Well, Jesus, just give me more and then I'll give. No, you won't. No, you won't. No, you won't. So are you hearing me? Have a baseline of discipline, and then have spirit-led frequency above your basic discipline. And have liberty in your baseline of discipline. Give it to people who are really doing something. Well, let's talk about it. All right, here we go. Okay, I'm a de-church person. My friend Michael Rose says this. He says, love has feet. And you know what your feet carry? Your feet carry money. So where as a de-church, organic church person, should I look to give my money? Here we go. The widow. Now, I'm going to define these a little more broadly here in a minute. The widow indeed, and the poor. Now, in our culture, that gets a little fuzzy, doesn't it? So could I say it is the other, the outsider, the aloner. It may include bona fide widows, and it may include the bona fide poor, but boy, in our society, it's really difficult to determine what's legit, right? But how do you answer that? By getting to know people, right back to relationship. So the love of God is shed abroad through our heart. Oh, I just gave the answer. The Holy Spirit does what? Sheds the love of God from our heart to others. So where do I learn to give? Follow the tracks of love. Where is your love leading? That's really the summation of this book. We don't give 10% because we have to give 10%. I am free to lay down my money on the tracks of love.
That's good, Steve.
Love. It is appropriate to give based on need, but it's also appropriate just to give Jeff has a wonderful story. Can you tell a story about you giving to Bevan and Carla that one time, what a blessing it was to them, and even though they're very well-to-do, how it's not just need-based? Share that story.
Back when I first met them?
Yeah, remember you told me, so you gave them an offering or something one time and how it spoke to them?
Yeah, well, these people were multi-millionaires, but anyhow, I'm a creative guy, so I have the talents. And I let them know as they're trying to be a sponge and kind of suck them up for an offering. I said, what can I do to give you?
Now stop, can we just stop that for a minute? Did you get that? He's talking about a multi-millionaire. How many times does a multi-millionaire have somebody come up to them and say, what can I give you? Finish your story.
So anyhow, I did some work for them, just didn't expect, I didn't charge them. You know, I've been a high-end designer for a long time, but anyhow, I just gave that to them, but that birthed a really awesome relationship. But, you know, people like that, they're so used to, you know, the give me, my name is Jimmy deal. And didn't come in that posture, it just really birthed a really awesome relationship. It's been like 7 years now. We've had a really cool, but here's what's so neat. You know, they have been strong proponents to the dream and the vision that Father put in our heart and have sown in our lives without even an expectation of that, because we first wanted to give to them.
Great story. My point in that story is it makes sense. It's appropriate to look for need, but sometimes there's those spirit-led things. Don't go here on those. Well, you know, they don't need it. You don't know where their soul is at. You don't know what kind of pain they're in. Whether or not you give or don't give doesn't nothing to do with whether they're a millionaire or not. You know what I'm saying? So that's not the definitive line for my giving. And I have story after story, which I'm not going to take time today, that people's lives have been changed because somebody gave them a quart of milk. And that sort of thing.
One last thing also,
yeah.
See, because my wife and I, just to give you a little background, we really haven't had a lot of FRNs or cash, if you will, but I gave what I...
Yes. What did our brother give?
The TTTs, man. I mean, so we always have something to give.
Always have something to give.
And so
always.
No lesser than around here. I don't care. We all have something.
All have something to give. Very good. So on the widow and the poor, if I could contextualize, it's the outsider, the ones that, you know, the ones that they don't fit. They're the ones on the margins of society, whatever that is in our culture, okay? Pretty broad. This one is super important. The brotherhood, sisterhood, the ecclesia, the brotherhood in need. How do I define that? By relationship.
Amen.
By relationship. How many have discovered I can't fix everybody's problem? Can't fix everybody's problems. But I need to hear the Spirit of God. And remember we talked the session we had about relational assignments and maybe 5 or 6 or 2 or 3? Remember my story about my friend going to Uganda who spent $3,000 for a plane ticket because of what? A relational assignment. Remember the story about the dance hall and all that? See, that's why we have to establish those things, because we can't exercise this if those things aren't established. As much as, you know, somebody's pain over here is very real, it's just not within my bandwidth and my sphere to deal with it. Somebody else is going to have to deal with that. But if everybody is doing their bit, what eventually happens? Jeff, a fractile network starts to happen, right? Little pockets build a net of interconnectivity. So the brotherhood in need. Notice we haven't hit church buildings yet.
Are you serious?
Gospel expansion. All right, that gets into the ministry side of things.
Have to buy my boat.
Yeah, to buy your gold-plated boat. I'm afraid to say I do know a lot of reactionary organic church people who think they're off the hook for that. And I cover it in here. They're not doing it, and they go, well, I don't have any money. I had this conversation with somebody. Oh, she got so mad at me, she never spoke to me again. And here's what I annoyed her. I said, we all have something we can give. You can give $50 to mission or some minister. No, I can't. My husband and I are just where we're spending. I said, you have enough stuff in your cellar and in your attic and in your garage that you never use. You could sell tomorrow and give $50. Don't. She never spoke to me again. You can't talk to me like that. You don't have any right to talk to me about my money. That's American culture speaking there. That's Americanism. And I wasn't trying to be aggressive. I'm just saying, think what? Creatively. Your excess, the stuff you have hanging in the garage, you use it 3 times in 10 years. Really? You can't cough up $50? The Cubans have a saying. Our friend Jose Bosque is a Cuban. He shared this with me. They have a saying, when you throw a shoe in a pack of dogs, the one that barks is the one you hit. Otherwise, the one who's making the biggest noise is probably the one who needed to be hit. All right. General charity. That's your alms and all that. One of the things I appreciate about my wife, she works at Starbucks and she takes her tip money. She has what she calls her alms money. So appreciated because you know what she does? No questions asked, no discussions about whether they're going to misuse it or not, because guess what? That's between them and God. If she gives, it's an opportunity for general charity. So now here's what I want you to do. Right in your where are you in each of these? Just think about it. And again, don't get hung up on absolute dollar amounts. You know 1,000 people giving $1 can really help somebody? 500 people giving $2 can really help somebody. We get so hung up because, well, I can't give 50 or I can't give 100 or whatever. No, but if you have 100 people giving $2, you just help somebody. I have found this to be an excellent template to gauge my own soul. How are you doing? Steve, have you gone a little tight? The other problem on this topic, and I'm sure, knowing Samuel a little bit that I know him, I know he's a very practical guy, very entrepreneurial guy. I'm very thankful about that. He has a real grace for that. Debt is a curse.
Boom, boom.
Because you don't have the liberty to be generous if you're carrying a bunch of debt.
There it is.
I have no issue with enjoying the benefits of our life, as Americans. I want to be mindful to the others in need. I want to be large of heart. I don't have any guilt that we have a nice place to live and all that stuff. Me living in a box down by the river is not going to help somebody else's life. But me indulging myself in rabid American cultural values is not the answer either. We've got to find a middle road someplace, right? Based on what? Not guilt for being American, based on assignment. Based on who has been brought into my sphere. Who has the need? Who has the need at the moment? And maybe I can't do something at the moment, but I can do something later. That table on the end has mentioned intentionality. Guys, I am convinced that the issue of giving has to be intentional. If you wait for the Holy Spirit moment, those are exciting moments when they happen, but they don't happen regularly. I just want to give when I can because it is the right thing to do. Organic church people, de-church, de-institutionalized people, do not use your liberty for an occasion to the flesh. Be purposeful, be conscious, be mindful. I so appreciate what Harry brought up, because I'm not going to drag this on, but I actually have a whole chapter in here about trust, because that's exactly what's happened. Some of us have been violated.
Yes.
You've been violated. You have been raped spiritually and emotionally. You've been pillaged. You've been manipulated. You've been defiled on this issue of money. And it is unreasonable to expect you not to have some trust issues. And I have a whole chapter about that. That is the underpinning of the new order. People are not going to give anymore where trust is not established. And when trust is lost, it takes a lot to recover, if at all. So trust itself is a very precious commodity.
It is.
And so I understand that there may be some in here, including ourselves, I don't even want to think of the kind of money I gave. And I know some of you were higher rollers than Rita and I were, the money I gave to that beast. And Harry's right. We got to get over that. And the only way to get over that is back to relationship and time. And we're right back to assignment and relationship one with another. One last thing for today. I have a friend he has a little threefold thing for giving, particularly if you're in and you're enjoying a traditional construct. Listen, there are the usual needs. Number one, usual needs. Hey, I want the toilet to flush. I want the heat on. I want the air conditioning on. I want and that's a sort of stuff. As a family or as an entity, those are the basic needs. Number two, unusual needs. The car breaks down. We have an unusual need in our midst here as a community. The roof is leaking. The septic is busted. Well, there's an opportunity to give. And then the third one is the one I like. He calls it inspired needs. Otherwise, those unique opportunities of inspiration where I am just so overjoyed to give to bless somebody. So usual needs, unusual needs, and inspired needs. So there's like three other tiers that you can kind of direct your giving.
For additional books, materials, and resources, including Kindle, EPUB, and PDF files, please go to stevecrosby.com. For free articles, MP3s, and resources, go to stevecrosby.org.